Hello, I'm Thal Smith, and today I'm reviewing the final book of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Return of the King. Obviously, the book is fantastic, a phenomenal conclusion to this whole epic story. It's just great. It's an awesome book. I just thought, since the last review of Lord of the Rings, there's one thing I've been wanting to talk about. What's interesting is that although Tolkien is the grandfather of fantasy, the genre we know as today, The Lord of the Rings was written that it wasn't necessarily as a fantasy. Let me explain. Tolkien was a nerd, or geek, whichever you prefer term wise, and I mean this in an endearing way, towards classical literature. We're talking epic poetry, for example, and stuff like the Volsung, I'm probably pronouncing this wrong, the Volsung Saga or something like that. Yeah, and you can see in a lot of the writing of the Lord of the Rings, there is this very traditional composition that is very much like it, and there's a lot of interlappings of classical stories, classical literature stories. There's a reference hint of Atlantis, and I totally zone out the name. They mentioned in the book, but there's this place that they mentioned that was like Atlantis. It was great, and then it fell into the sea. Um, Obviously, the Great Havens, which kind of has a double parallel to two things. One is, I believe it's called Avalon in King Arthur mythology. You know how the king got deeply wounded and was sent off to the sea to be healed, and he come at Britain's greatest need. So I think that's where part of the Great Havens came from, and the other thing I think was obviously heaven as well. Um, yeah, and you see bits of stuff like that throughout the Lord of the Rings, and I think one thing that should be mentioned, because this is my personal opinion on the whole Lord of the Rings thing, is unlike how nowadays, with a lot of fantasy, it's in another world or something like that. I I I get the distinct impression, for me personally, that that's not the case in, say, the Lord of the Rings. I think Middle Earth, in every sense of the word, is Earth. I think it's literally meant to be Earth, and a very early Earth before the Earth we live in now. And I think it's indicated in the fact of how the other races sort of dwindle, and they make mention that now is the age of men, sort of indicating on that. And I think Middle Earth was a term just meant like how they're in the middle of the Earth or something like that.